I almost was in color. I'm just making sure I'm not getting out of shape. I could see myself in the camera. Just making sure I'm still fit. And I almost was in color. I'm in color every once in a while. I usually stick with the black and white. Sometimes I go sepia tone. Benson Henderson, as everybody knows, is going to be fighting in Bellator. I was like, whatever, I don't know. I mean, I never really liked Benson Henderson when he was the champion. It was like he was one of those decision fighters, and some of those fights he won by like the skin of his teeth, but he's very, very talented, very, very skilled, and he's going to fight in Bellator. I didn't really have an opinion on it, and then I got to thinking, I'm interested to see if he's going to win in Bellator. Because here's the deal. For years and years, we've been told, and a lot of people really believed it, and to this day I don't believe it, that all the best fighters in the world fight in the UFC. That is not true. The key word in that statement is all. Most of the best fighters in the world probably right now do fight in the UFC. It's MMA fighters, but not all. And I mean, this was more true years ago than it is true now, but it's still true to this day. The most recent examples of this is Holly Holm. Holly Holm was down in the UFC, and before she signed with the UFC, she was probably just as good as she is now. So here you have everyone talking about Ronda Rousey. They're telling you she's the best fighter in the world, and yet you have the best fighter in the world is not even signed with the UFC. And then the second example is Conor McGregor. I mean, Conor McGregor's only been in the UFC not that long. I don't know how long it's been, but it hasn't been that long. So when he was in two-way world champion in Cage Warriors, which people, it's just Cage Warriors. Well, if he were to come over here while he was Cage Warriors champion and fight the guys in the UFC, he probably would have crushed them. I mean, not only was the UFC not a challenge for Conor McGregor, he's absolutely destroyed the guys. I mean, I think the fights were harder for him in Cage Warriors when they were in the UFC. I mean, you'd swear he was fighting 12-year-olds. I mean, that's how easy it's been for him. And, take Holly Holm, for example. She goes up against Ronda Rousey, and it was a pretty easy fight for her. And this goes back a long time. I mean, to this day, all the top fighters in the UFC, not all, but most of them, all the champions, you got Fabricio Verdum, he's a champion. Okay, he fought in Strikeforce. Daniel Cormier, he's from Strikeforce, he's a champion. Robbie Lawler, he's from Strikeforce, he's a champion. So back in the day, they would have, everyone was telling you the best fighters in the UFC, so I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I think a lot of people are expecting Benson Henderson to be a big star in Bellator. He may go over there and lose. I do think Benson Henderson is a pretty intelligent guy, and based on his skill set, I mean, he's very humble considering how skilled the guy is. I think he's aware of that, and I think he knows that he's got to be careful. I mean, he's got to train the same. If anything, he has to be even more on his A game, if that's possible. He needs to be even more on his A game. And there's a million examples in the UFC. I mean, one of the examples is when Fedor fought Andrei Arlovsky and beat Arlovsky, because there was all the Fedor haters back then. Well, like, oh, Arlovsky's not the same as he used to be. Okay, so he wasn't the same as he used to be, and he was past his prime, yet Andrei Arlovsky currently came back to the UFC and has been very successful. So he's even older, but he was past his prime when Fedor beat him, right? But then he came to the UFC and he's been very successful. He did lose his last fight, but he's been very, very successful in returning to the UFC. So, I mean, this has just gone on like this for years and years. So I'll be curious to see if you know, he might have a tough time in Bellator, man. He may have a tough time in Bellator. I mean, I do expect him to win, but I am curious to see, and I think a lot of people may be shocked. I mean, I don't know. I don't really watch Bellator that closely, but this does spark my interest. I'm curious to see, you know, if he starts walking through opponents, we may see some more guys go from the UFC to Bellator to fight. He may just get worked, man. He may show up his first fight and get worked. You just don't know in this sport. But it does raise, based on the history of all the UFC fighters are the best and these fighters over here are sub-tier, that most definitely has not been true. That has not been true. Okay? Well, let me know what you guys think, guys. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. You can even like the video. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys later.